Hello there, I'm Nick, and this is Portable, where we look at the portable ports of console games. You ever looking through a Game Boy section at your local retro game store and do a double take and think to yourself, wait, they made a Game Boy version of that? Well, that's what this show's all about, to help satiate that curiosity and let you know if a game is worth your time. I rarely see anybody talk about these games, and, well, as you'll find out, that's usually for a good reason. All the same, I'm curious, and if you are too, I hope you'll indulge me for the next few minutes. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at the Game Gear version of Sonic Spinball, which I recently mentioned in my last episode of Game Apologist, covering the Genesis version. It's mostly the same game, certainly the same concept, taking Sonic through a pinball adventure to yet again stop Dr. Robotnik, and like the Genesis game, Spinball on the Game Gear is split up into the same 4 levels and still follows the same nothing story and shares a lot of the same assets. There is a different soundtrack, and the level introduction screen is just terrifying. Before it was just a mountain with Robotnik's face, but now the entire thing is just leering at you as you make your way up its innards. The major difference you're going to see here is the collision detection and physics. Like I mentioned in the Genesis episode, while that version felt a bit off compared to the normal Sonic games, this one feels way more off. I wouldn't call it unplayable, but if you had told me this was some bootleg version of Spinball, you could probably give me a compelling argument. That would probably be the most glaring and unfortunate difference, but the developers mitigated some of the frustrations by making the game a little easier. And there are different layouts to these maps, sometimes. Okay, mostly toxic caves, but even then it's not that far off from the original design. And they do have a different boss here. A good majority of the rest of the game strongly resembles its big brother, but they still hold back from some of the more confusing layouts. Even the notorious final showdown level, while still tough, is nowhere near as aggravating as the original version. Maybe it's just because I've played 2 versions of Spinball back to back, maybe I don't have the difficulty high enough, but despite the janky physics, this version was much less of a chore to get through. Spend enough time away from the classic physics and get to grips with what's on offer, and it's a good time. I did notice that we seem to get Sonic unrolling a little more often than the Genesis version, and he has the jump noise from the original games. You can actually spend a good majority of the final fight without ever smacking against the paddles, and this is especially noticeable with the completely different bonus stages. Unlike the Genesis version, where they gave you a different kind of pinball to play, this time they put Sonic into a more traditional platforming area. You're still going to spend a lot of your time as a ball, but you need to make your own momentum, spin dash, and jump around to collect rings, giving you more direct control over Sonic. These sections, more than any other, will show you just how off Sonic feels when compared to the Genesis originals, or even the other Game Gear games. But I still enjoyed the change-up, and the Egyptian motif. Not sure what they were going for here. Maybe they were alluding to an ancient civilization within the mountain that Robotnik had corrupted? I don't know. Overall, the game is fine. Now that I've beaten it, I have no desire to play it again, but I'm glad I experienced it. I don't feel it's anywhere near as bad as I've heard others say it is. That said, I also didn't know this game came out a year after the Genesis version. I guess that explains the different box art. I know it's a less powerful system, I just think it's a shame that the first game was rushed out the door. Yet this one is a year late and plays worse. Seriously, you could make an argument that Mario had a better portable pinball experience compared to this one, but I'm gonna put those problems on the limitation of the hardware. Honestly, looking at this as a kid in 1994, this was more than a commendable effort. If you love the home version, I'd imagine the portable one would satisfy you just fine on a long road trip. So, would I recommend it? Well, that's not an easy answer. If you have no interest in this system or Sonic, then no. I can barely recommend the Genesis one as it is. But I would recommend experiencing this game if you're at all curious. Because if you are, you're probably a fan of the Game Gear, or D-Makes, or Spinball, or Sonic in general. And it's worth at least playing around with it for a handful of minutes just so you get an idea of what they managed to cram into this little cartridge. And if you're watching this video, you're probably one of those people. That's who this show is for. People who want to see how much of a console experience they can cram into an underpowered piece of hardware. What had to be stripped out? And does what remained manage to carry the name of its more powerful counterpart? Spinball is unique, because as far as I know, it's the only Sonic title that is a portable version of the original Genesis edition. It's not as good in some instances, but a lot less frustrating in others. A worthwhile experience for the curious. The rest of you, carry on with your day. Toot toot, Sonic Warriors.